Welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Shaun and Jim.
Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. I'm Jim Galante. He is Shaun Gold. Shaun, how we doing this week, my friend?
Doing well, another week. Good topics on the slate today. I'm excited to get it going.
I am too. A lot going on for a lot of folks. This is that slow time. The basketball season's over. We had the basketball draft, the NBA draft, which we had talked about. Football camps haven't started yet. It's really just baseball going on. So I thought we could start there for a change. We haven't hit too much baseball. We're kind of at that halfway point in the season. We'll be hitting the All-Star game soon. Shaun, what sticks out to you for this Major League Baseball season?
I've got some interesting teams actually on my list here today, and I want to start with probably a team, not two teams actually, that not many people have watched games about. But the Los Angeles Angels are 41 and 42. Now, I don't see them in the playoffs, but this was supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league. So to be right around 500 is actually very impressive to me for what this Angels team was supposed to be. That to me is one of the biggest surprises of the year. They only have two qualified hitters batting over 250 right now, but they find ways to win enough games to stay afloat right now, which is super interesting because, again, this was supposed to be a disastrous year for them. They made virtually no big moves in the offseason. It seems like Mike Trout should be traded, but he's happy in LA and he doesn't want to go anywhere. But what's best for the franchise would be to recoup some assets, and they refuse to do that. So Angels are one of my surprises just because they're mediocre, which is not what I expected out of them. And another team that not quite as good as the Angels, but the Chicago White Sox, compared to last year, they are a great team this year. Now they're only 28 and 56. They're still a bottom feeder in the MLB, but another team that they did virtually nothing over the offseason. It looked like it was going to be a repeat of a historically bad year. And more so than their record, they've actually been competitive in games. They're not that pushover. And especially for anybody listening who kind of dives into the betting markets of this, the White Sox now have become a semi-scary team to go against sometimes because they will actually win a game now, which last year you could bet on them to go, 15 games in a row without sniffing a win. And, they'll win a game every series that they're in type of thing. They're not a great team by any means, but they've been pleasantly surprising and pleasantly competitive this year. So those have been two surprises for me on the good side. On the bad side, the Baltimore Orioles. This is a team that won their division 2 years ago, had 90 plus wins last year, and have completely fallen off. They've made some changes. They're looking better right now, but they're not going to be able to overcome the rough start that they had this year, and they will not be a playoff team unless they go on, a 30-5 type of stretch in the second half of the season here. That's a big disappointment to me. I think the biggest one in the league. This is a team that has a ton of young talent, a ton of top prospects, and they were supposed to be a team that could rival the Yankees, for the status in that division. And something happened this year and they just kind of fell off a cliff for a bit.
Some interesting names there. A couple responses to them. First of all, the Orioles. I have a good friend who is just a maniac for the Orioles, and he is so frustrated with them, so disgusted with them, and I get that. And Baltimore was a team that had the best minor league system of anyone over the last 5 years or so. And it was as if all this talent was going to be coming up year after year after year. But not all of those players were going to come up and produce and even get a chance to play. You needed to make that move, Shaun. Get that veteran pitcher in, get that leader in. They never did that. And it's coming back to haunt them. A couple of teams. I have my surprise teams or surprises for the season. A couple things. You mentioned a team like the LA Angels who surprised by approaching mediocrity. I'll give you another team. How about those Tampa Bay Rays? They lose their stadium. They're playing in a minor league park. Their team, there's all this controversy in Tampa Bay about they had an agreement for a new stadium that fell through. Just crazy stuff going on. They're in the process, it appears, to be sold. What does that mean? Are they going to be moved? Are they going to stay in Tampa, reignite that stadium? All these things going on, all these distractions. Lo and behold, they're in a position to be a playoff team, Shaun. That's and we shouldn't be surprised because they essentially do that every year. You mentioned how bad the White Sox were a year ago and how they are approaching, well, respectability, or at least, again, the word mediocrity. I'll switch over to the National League. The Colorado Rockies have taken over from the White Sox as perhaps historically the worst team ever. They are on a pace to lose 126 games. And that's after they've improved from earlier in the year, Shaun. So we could have historically bad teams one year after another going from the White Sox to the Rockies. One last note on surprises, though, Shaun. I'm going to go with an individual player. Now, we all know who Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, they're the best player in their respective leagues. And they're showing it again. Aaron Judge just he plays for the hated Yankees, the evil empire, but man, you just got to respect what this guy does. However, however, here's the guy whose numbers are right up there with Otani and Aaron Judge. And no one even knows who he is. Cal Raleigh, catcher, catcher for Seattle. Have you seen his numbers? 32 home runs, 388 on base percentage, over 1,000 OPS, 4.6 WAR already, Shaun. That is just crazy numbers for a guy no one's ever heard of.
I'm really glad that you brought up Cal Raleigh here. And for everybody listening, to do that as a catcher as well is incredible. He's putting way more stress on his body than any other position, in the field. Like playing outfield versus playing catcher are not the same thing at all. You're not crouched down. You're not taking, tipped balls right to the mask of your face every single
Or
game.
a
And
worse spot.
exact 100%. And I was listening to something on the radio the other day that he's never going into a game feeling probably at even 90%, let alone 100%. There's always something that's going to be hurting. And for him to go hit 30 plus home runs before the All-Star break is truly historic. And I really do hope, because when you still measure him up against Aaron Judge, it is a toss-up for MVP. I would give some leeway to playing catcher in that equation though right now. So I hope his second half of the season can be as good as the first half, because he deserves to be an MVP award winner right now. And if he gets to, that 50 home run mark, I don't see how he doesn't win it with everything else that he has to do from a fielding perspective. Even if Aaron Judge hits more home runs or has a higher average, when you put in the whole factor of how incredible it is that you're a catcher doing this, which is something that's never been done before, if he continues on this pace, I don't see how he's not MVP. And we do sometimes see players have an incredible first half and drop down in the second half. So I'm very much hoping that's not going to be the case for Cal Raleigh, because this season has just been incredible for him.
It has been, and I'm rooting for him also, Shaun. But here's the reality. You pointed out, as a catcher, he's never going to feel good day to day. He's going to get beat up, and it could be just a foul tip to the hand, and all of a sudden he's in a slump for 2 or 3 weeks, still playing, but having to deal with it. That's what catchers do. And I'm rooting for him for MVP. But Aaron Judge, with his numbers, the power numbers are all comparable. But this is a guy still hitting over 350. It's going to be hard to deny Aaron Judge. And like you said, as a catcher, you anticipate Raleigh to slow down, get some little nicks and bruises the second half of the year. But still, I mean, this is a guy who could stop playing the rest of the season tomorrow, and his numbers are still very impressive. So rooting for Cal Raleigh, and also just one last note: team with the best record in baseball, Detroit. Detroit. I will root. I'm a New York Mets fan, as most people know who listen to our shows. I don't pay much attention to the American League, but Detroit, okay, Detroit is like the Cal Raleigh of the teams, or vice versa. Raleigh is the player of, like Detroit is of the. You don't pay attention to them. They're just the difference between what they did with their young players and what they've become versus what happened with the Orioles. It's a night and day how the two franchises have moved along.
Completely agree with that. And when you talk about Detroit, I mean, Tariq Skubal having just another historic year, fresh off a Cy Young. If nothing changes, from now to the end of the season, he's going to be a back-to-back Cy Young winner, and he will be amongst some historic categories if he sustains the pace that he's on right now. So, most people probably can't name too many players besides Skubal on the Tigers, but tune in because they have guys. Their pitching's great, and they do lack, like a true superstar. But Javi Baez is a guy who's finally making his contract worthwhile after like 4 or 5 years of just terrible production. And Riley Green's, some true MLB people might know the name. He was a top prospect for a while, never really lived up to the hype. I think this is his 4th year in the majors now. He's finally, giving that production that people expected from him. So Detroit has the pieces. I don't know if it's going to be good enough to win a World Series, but they're going to be a team that's very dangerous that you don't want to have to face when that time comes, in the playoffs. Now, let's transition over to the NBA now. We last week talked about the draft, saw the draft happen, winners and losers of the draft so far. There's going to be a lot more that we'll talk about in the coming weeks because free agency has been off to a hot start, but we'll leave that alone right now because you and I know by the end of this recording, there could be 6 more signings and 2 more trades that shake up the entire league. So we'll stick more to the draft here today. But what are your initial thoughts on, who did well, who did not?
A couple things with it. First of all, and this is stating the obvious, the Mavericks getting a historic player, perhaps. Is it going to be far away from him becoming the face of the NBA? And it's just so interesting, though. They won the lottery. Okay, their odds of getting the number one pick were so slim. They're able to get draft Cooper Flag, and this is after they traded away Luka Doncic, and they I don't want to say give away, but close to giving away a franchise top player. The luck of the draw, they get another one with that first pick. Both player, team, they have to be considered winners. The other thing, Ace Bailey, and he tried so hard to manipulate the draft to work out the way he wanted it. The Sixers, they fell into place for him. They didn't draft him at number 3, where most people had him slotted. He was looking to fall to at least number 6. Number 5, the Jazz step up and say, "We don't care if you don't want to come out here or not. We're taking you." I don't know if in the long run that's going to make both the franchise and the player winners. Right now, though, Ace Bailey, he didn't get what he wanted. Too bad, Ace. Utah, I want to give them credit for saying, we don't care that we didn't interview you. We don't care that you didn't want to come here. If you want to play in the NBA, son, you come here to play. The other thing that I thought was really fascinating, uh, Shaun, and I think in terms of all sports with this, what is the underrated, underappreciated category? And I'm going a long way to make my point here, but anyway, I often bring up Moneyball, and people will talk about what was the meaning of it, and it was like, oh, on base percentage, walking means a lot, means more. No, what the story really was is there was nobody cared at that time about on base percentage. They worried about batting average. So it was an underappreciated skill set. I'm wondering now with the NBA. Also, in the NFL, we saw running backs were underappreciated, undervalued. Then the Eagles go bring in this guy by the name of Saquon Barkley and they win a Super Bowl. Okay. Howie Roseman said, we're not going to play the game like everyone else. Like I said, long way to get to my point, which is in the NBA, they value youth so much, the one and done players. I found this fascinating. The first round, 30 draft picks. Do you know how many were teenagers?
Oh, got to be more than half, I got to think.
22 out of 30 were teenagers. Mostly, freshmen one and done, and a lot of international guys coming in. Do you know how many second round picks were teenagers?
A lot less, I would assume.
Two. Two out of 30. I'm wondering, is that veteran player underappreciated? And I'll give you two names that stuck out to me. Walter Clayton, who was so tremendous for the Florida Gators, he wasn't picked until number 18. Now he was a first rounder. He was one of those few non-teenagers. And then as another example, in the second round, pick number 35, Johnny Broom goes to the Sixers. And he was what, second, third in the voting for, most outstanding player last year. For a while, there was some articles. Who's going to be the number one player in college basketball? Cooper Flag or Johnny Broom? And he's picked 35th. I'm thinking those upperclassmen are the undervalued asset in the NBA. I told you it would take me a long time to get to the point, Shaun, but I think that's one of the things we're going to become aware of in the
I,
couple years.
I completely agree with that. And especially for these teams picking out, I get it for the lottery teams, for the rebuilding teams. You want the youth, you want to hit on that, high end superstar. And maybe the guys who have been in college 2 or 3 years aren't going to be that type of player. But you know what? Maybe they will be your Clay Thompson on your team, a guy who can shoot, who can defend, who's going to be reliable every single night. And for teams picking, you know, 20 to 30 or in the second round and you're already in contention in your conference, go get a guy who's going to compete for you right now. A lot of teams don't have the luxury of saying, "Hey, you know what? We'll go with the project who can start in the G League and develop." Like, look at the path Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo had, right? Not a lot of teams have the luxury to say, "We don't need a player on our active roster right now, so we'll go, in the second round and take a guy who just has tremendous upside, unlikely to hit, but if he does hit, he's going to be a superstar." I really am a fan of going and getting somebody, if you're a contending team, who has the experience to compete on your roster day one to help you win games this season, not 3 seasons from now. So I'm completely with you on that. I think there's going to be a lot of guys, especially from this draft. We saw the second round was full of all conference, all American type of players who just, hey, you're a year too old. Sorry, you're 21. That's old now for the draft type of thing, right? And so I'm excited to see some of these guys. And I want to go back to one name you had said, Ace Bailey. One of the most interesting stories of this draft, we in the NBA especially, you don't typically see people try to avoid being drafted by certain franchises. I'm saying that Ace Bailey is a winner from this NBA draft. He just doesn't know it yet. Utah is a really good spot for him. He's going to have more freedom offensively than he would have with most any other team that would have drafted him. If he went to Philly, sorry, you're behind Tyrese Maxey, you're behind Paul George, you're behind Joel Embiid, assuming that they're actually playing games. And then it'd be you, but maybe you, because you still got other guys who, deserve the ball and are going to score. Ace Bailey can go into Utah and potentially be the leading scorer amongst all rookies this year because he's going to have that freedom. And I also don't think that Utah is as far off as a lot of people make them. They have talent on that team. It's just young talent that hasn't developed into winning. So he may actually help build a really solid nucleus in Utah. And the last part about Ace Bailey is I think that Danny Ainge being there, you have such a respectable basketball figure there. How can you not go and sit down with Danny Ainge, learn from him about his experiences in the NBA, and be like, you know what, I can rock with this guy. Let's make it happen. So, Ace Bailey might not have known it on draft night, but I think this is surprisingly going to be a very good fit for him.
What I think is ironic is that's actually what he was looking for. He didn't want to go to a team where he'd be overshadowed, which the Sixers do have multiple star players there, and he wanted to be the lead dog. What's really funny though is maybe in a couple years we're going to hear him wanting to go to another team where there's other stars so
Hmm.
he could win a championship, Sean. So we'll see how that goes. But I will. By the way, I do have to point out because I'm sure someone will bring this up to me. The reason why all those young guys were drafted in the first round is the very best players have to go to college for 1 year, but they could be one and done. So a guy like Cooper Flag, he's going to go. He's the very best. He will go at the very top of the draft. I get that, and you have that with Dylan Harper and multiple other players that could be pointed out. But what I'm saying is, all the way through the whole NBA concept, they will always go for that a younger player who they feel has an upside to them. And I think sometimes those players, yeah, there's upside, but sometimes there's a low floor also. I think Johnny Broom has a high floor, and I think that's important for a second round pick. I think that was a great pick for the Sixers. All right, Shaun, let's move on to our final topic of the day. You and I love college football. The news this past week, the Pac 12, they invited Texas State to join them. What that means is they are the eighth football playing team, and they are going to be a Pac 12 again certified. They had to have at least eight football playing teams to qualify according to NCAA rules. They were given that couple year leeway. That's also part of the rules. I don't think the Pac 12 is going to get themselves back into that big four, but credit to them after they just were wiped out, first of all, by the Big Ten, then by the ACC. Literally two teams left, and they were able to rebuild themselves. And probably most importantly, they have a media contract with CBS now. It's not going to be Southeast Conference or Big Ten or even ACC or Big 12 money, but they are going to have a steady flow of income. Good for the Pac 12.
Definitely good for the Pac-12, and credit to them, like you said, they went down to two teams. They now got up to eight. Now, this is what I'll say though. Here's my honest thoughts. Pac-12 now consists for everyone: Texas State, Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Gonzaga, Oregon State, San Diego State, Utah State, and Washington State. Who cares? I'm sorry, but who cares? Boise State is not going to be what they were with Ashton Genty. That's not You're not going to have the same hype around that team. And a lot of these other programs, they're going to be middle of the pack schools. Hopefully, for the Pac-12's sake, as the money starts coming in, as you can maybe, do some more NIL, they'll be able to build up a powerhouse. And maybe one of these teams for, in the next 2 to 3 years will be, a perennial top 10 team for the next 10, 15 years. That's the hope for the conference. But for now, they took the steps they needed to take, but it doesn't move the needle much at all for me. This is still Big Ten, SEC nation with, the ACC and the Big 12 following suit. The Pac 12, I think it's going to take a very long time for them to build up to be hey, you're a real respectable conference now that other teams are going to fear now.
They have to prove themselves first as the best of the rest conferences before they could even talk about being part of the Power Four. Not going to be part of the foreseeable future. They have a shot at being a decent basketball conference. What we
Mhm.
haven't mentioned so far is Gonzaga will be part of the conference, but not they're not a football playing school. Uh, but you also have teams like San Diego State there, good basketball school. So it could be interesting for basketball. I'm going to be interested to see. Remember, uh, now you are from the West Coast, so it wasn't after dark for you.
Mm.
But here on the East Coast, we used to have the Pac 12 after dark games, at 10 or 11 o'clock our time, would get a Pac 12 game, which was always fun. After maybe you were at the game yourself during the day, you get home late, you could flip on the tube. It will be interesting to see if there's a new Pac 12 after dark and what those ratings will be. All right, Shaun, that's going to be the last word for our show this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you join us again next week on Shauns Take.
Keystone Sports Network.